The first snowfall of December had painted the city in soft white, but beneath the beauty lay a harsh reality that 8-year-old Emma knew all too well. She stood on the corner of 5th and Main, her small hands wrapped around a worn spray bottle and a collection of ragged towels. The gray knit hat pulled down over her ears was too big, a hand-me-down from the church donation box, but it kept her warm as she waited for the next car to stop at the red light. Emma's breath created small clouds in the cold air as she watched the traffic. Her brown coat, patched at the elbows, hung loose on her tiny frame. She had been coming to this corner every day after school for 3 weeks now, ever since her mother had fallen ill and couldn't work at the diner anymore. The medical bills were piling up, and their small apartment felt colder each day as the heating bill went unpaid. At first, Emma had been scared to approach the cars. The drivers would look at her with confusion, some with pity, others with annoyance. But desperation had made her brave. She learned to smile through her nervousness, to be polite and quick with her work. Most people gave her $1 or $2, sometimes just the loose change from their cup holders. It wasn't much, but every coin brought them a little closer to keeping their home. The afternoon light was beginning to fade when a sleek black sedan pulled up to the intersection. Emma could see her reflection in the tinted windows as she approached. The car was expensive, the kind that made her worn sneakers feel even more shabby against the salted pavement. She tapped gently on the driver's window, her spray bottle ready. The window rolled down slowly, revealing a man in his 40s with tired eyes and a perfectly pressed suit. His name was David Chen, though Emma wouldn't learn this until later. He had been the CEO of a successful tech company for 15 years, but success had come at a cost. His marriage had ended 3 years ago, his children lived across the country with their mother, and his penthouse apartment echoed with loneliness every night. David had been driving home from another late meeting when he saw the small figure on the corner. Something about the child's determination, the way she stood straight despite the cold, made him pull over. He wasn't sure why. He usually avoided eye contact with panhandlers, not out of cruelty, but out of the protective numbness that had become his default response to the world's pain. "Would you like me to clean your windows, sir?" Emma asked, her voice small but clear. She had practiced this line until it sounded natural, professional even. David studied her face through the open window. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of his own daughter, Sarah, who was only 2 years older than this child. "It's pretty cold out here," he said softly. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded quickly, though her cheeks were red from the wind. "Yes, sir, I'm good at cleaning windows. I won't leave any streaks." There was a dignity in her response that struck David unexpectedly. He glanced at his windshield, which was already clean, then back at Emma's hopeful face. "All right," he said. "Go ahead." Emma worked with careful precision, spraying the glass and wiping it down with practiced movements. Her technique had improved over the weeks, and she took pride in doing the job well. David watched her through the windshield, noticing how she bit her lip in concentration, how she stretched on her toes to reach the top corners. When she finished, Emma stepped back and smiled. "All done, sir. That'll be whatever you think is fair." David reached for his wallet, but instead of pulling out a few bills, he found himself asking, "What's your name?" "Emma," she replied, stamping her feet slightly to warm them. "Emma, can I ask you something? Why aren't you in school right now?" "School ended an hour ago, sir. I come here after." David felt a knot forming in his stomach. "Do your parents know you're doing this?" Emma's expression grew more serious. "It's just me and my mom. She's been sick, so she can't work. I'm helping until she gets better." The simple honesty of her answer hit David like a physical blow. He thought of his own daughter, safe and warm in her mother's house in California, complaining about having to do homework. Here was this child, barely older than Sarah, taking responsibility for her family's survival. "Emma," David said carefully, "how long has your mother been sick?" "A few months now," Emma replied. "The doctors say she needs medicine, but medicine costs a lot of money. That's why I'm here. Every little bit helps." David looked at the $20 bill in his hand, then back at Emma's face. $20. It was less than what he spent on a single lunch, but for this child, it might mean the difference between eating dinner or going to bed hungry. "Emma, I'd like to give you this," he said, handing her the bill. "But I'd also like to know more about your situation. Is your mother at home right now?" Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the money. It was more than she usually made in an entire day. "Yes, sir, she's resting. Are you going to call someone?" David heard the fear in her voice and quickly shook his head. "No, nothing like that. I'd like to help more, if that's okay. Maybe I could speak with your mother. Emma hesitated, clutching the $20 tightly. Strangers weren't supposed to come home with her, but this man seemed kind. His eyes were sad in a way that made her think he understood about missing people. I live just 4 blocks from here, Emma said finally. In the blue apartment building with the broken sign. David knew the building. He passed it every day on his way to work, but he had never really seen it before. It was old, run down, the kind of place where people lived when they had no other choice. Would it be all right if I followed you home? David asked. I'd like to meet your mother and see if there's anything I can do to help. Emma nodded, and David parked his car in the building's small lot. As they walked up the narrow stairs to the 3rd floor, Emma chattered nervously about school, about her favorite subject being reading, about how she wanted to be a teacher someday. David listened to every word, struck by her resilience and optimism despite her circumstances. The apartment was small but clean, with worn furniture and walls that needed painting. Emma's mother, Maria, was lying on the couch, wrapped in a thin blanket. She looked up in alarm when her daughter entered with a stranger. Emma, who is this? Maria asked, struggling to sit up. This is the man who gave me $20 for cleaning his windows, Emma explained. He wanted to meet you. David introduced himself and explained how he had met Emma. As he spoke, he noticed the stack of medical bills on the kitchen table, the empty prescription bottles, the thermostat set to a temperature that was far too cold for comfort. Maria was embarrassed and defensive at first, worried that someone would think she was a bad mother for allowing Emma to work. But David's genuine concern and respectful manner gradually put her at ease. She told him about the autoimmune condition that had forced her to leave her job, about the insurance that barely covered anything, about lying awake at night worrying about their future. I never wanted Emma to have to do this, Maria said, tears in her eyes. But I didn't know what else to do. The rent is due next week, and we're behind on everything. David listened without judgment, thinking about his own comfortable life, about the bonuses he received that he barely noticed, about the loneliness that money couldn't fix. Here was a family facing real hardship, but they had something he had lost. They had each other. I'd like to help, David said quietly. Not just with money, though that's part of it. I'd like to make sure Emma doesn't have to work on street corners anymore. I'd like to make sure you get the medical care you need. Over the following weeks, David became a regular presence in Emma and Maria's lives. He paid for Maria's treatments, covered their rent and utilities, and set up a trust fund for Emma's education. But more than that, he became a friend. He would stop by after work, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just sitting and talking. Emma taught him to play card games, and he helped her with her homework. Maria shared stories of her childhood in Mexico, and David found himself talking about his own family, about the mistakes he had made and the loneliness he carried. On Christmas Eve, David arrived at their apartment with a small tree and a bag of presents. As they decorated it together, Emma looked up at him with shining eyes. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for the presents, but for being our friend. David felt tears in his eyes as he looked at this remarkable child who had changed his life by simply asking to clean his windows. He had thought he was rescuing them, but in truth, they had rescued him. Thank you, Emma, he replied, for reminding me what really matters. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in its quiet beauty. Inside the small apartment, 3 people who had found each other in the most unexpected way sat together, no longer strangers, no longer alone.